Welcome to the ECHORIFT show. I'm Don.
And I'm Mike. And this time, on this train, the fat boys push away from the dining cart to talk about Season 8, or Series 8 to us Yanks, or to them Brits, Episode 8, Doctor Who, something on the Mommy on the Orient Express.
Well done.
Mm.
That was excellent. And so was this episode. I know I keep saying that over and over again, but this was another episode where I actually I did see the trailer for it, and I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, and I not in a bad way. I just was like, oh, okay. And
I think that's a bad way. I think that was a bad way.
No, because I don't see episodes. I think I have seen trailers for episodes and thought, not interested. And I didn't have that feeling. I was just like, oh, the Doctor's got the weird tie on, and it's the Orient Express. Because Doctor Who does this thing, like they did it with the Titanic, and they've done it other times where there's this juxtaposition of a thing from the past and the future in a weird, inexplicable way, and like just to do it. And it looked like one of those episodes. And I guess it is, but it's a good one.
Yeah, first, I love that time period. So the idea of something taking place in the Orient Express was cool. I'm still perplexed by the idea of having to have been in space, because it could have happened on the original Orient Express. And I should pronounce the word. That's my Philly accent. Orient Express. I loved how this opened. That first frame of the clock, and then I think it's the second frame is the light bulb going out, and then the third frame is the mummy, and you hear the Doctor say something like "start the countdown" or "stop the countdown" or "stop the clock." It's more of what they've been doing this whole season, where there's this creep factor that's present throughout most of the episodes.
Yeah, I think this has to be the scariest season of Doctor Who yet. I mean, episode after episode has been a shocker. I think only the caretaker one, that was the sort of character, like, a third of the way into the season. Let's just get the character development established.
And we mustn't forget Robots of Sherwood, Don.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, and that was this sort of show the Doctor's humorous side and how he and Clara get together.
Doctor Who does teen sex comedy.
Does Mel Brooks. I really was surprised to see Clara. I didn't think she was going to be in it, and I think that was deliberate, but I thought, oh, we're going to have an episode where the Doctor's on his own. And when she's in the first scene with him, when he appears, I was really pleased. And she was super cute in this episode as well, her costume and everything.
And what a great bit of continuity. The last episode was probably the most emotional episode between a Doctor and a companion that wasn't either romantic or sad.
Yeah,
it was the most disturbing, sort of breakdown in the relationship between a Doctor and a companion. So it was great when they started this episode, and that is acknowledged right away. We don't really know how much time has passed. But we know that it seems to be the first time that they're together and that they're trying to make up.
Yeah, although she's doing it under the guise of their final date sort of thing. I mean, and that's also interesting that it's like two different things. And I really like the way the Doctor is reacting to that. Like, there's that one point when he's talking about the stars and she wants to talk about what she's doing. It's almost like she's insisting upon the situation, and there's this middle road of you don't know. I mean, he admits it, he doesn't exactly know how to react, so he's just rolling with it. And then there might be an element, particularly by the end, where the whole time he's thinking, I just got to give her time to work through this. If you're the Doctor, you know that all of your companion relationships end in tears or death or marriage of some kind or something. And, if you're the Doctor, it doesn't end that way with companions. So, there's even an element where he might just be waiting it out to see what happens.
Yeah, and there's a scene where they're in the hallway. It's after their first discussion, about their circumstances, where he says, "Can we talk about the planets now?"
Yeah.
Now, and they stop in this hallway, and it's outside their where the sleeping compartments.
Yeah.
So it's this very very narrow, barely one body can get by, and kind of romantic. Although it's not a romantic scene, but it's a romantic setting. And he says, "This is to our last hurrah." And they're both holding wine glasses at the time, if I'm not mistaken. But in any case, or Champagne, she says, I didn't realize this was the last one. And then he said, well, yeah, isn't that what you want? It's a great bit of dialogue, but there's a funny part where she says to him, why you could stop by for dinner, meaning she's not going to travel with him anymore, but it's not goodbye. And he says, why wouldn't I? And she says, well, I thought you'd think it was boring. And then he goes, is it boring? And it's so great that, like, a Time Lord having dinner at your house is just not realistic. It's not acceptable to waste his time that way.
Exactly.
A man with infinite time doesn't need his time.
Time wasted.
But it's something that they've been doing. I mean, what a miraculous move. Matt Smith, I think, had said that they had to kick off the next 50 years of Doctor Who, and God, they have just. Who would have thought that it would feel like it's starting over again?
Yeah, and it's funny because Stephen Moffat had said that back when Matt Smith, I mean, it was like it was season 5, and he said as far as he's concerned, it's season 1 because whenever a new Doctor starts, it's season 1. And you really get the sense now, having seen that twice, because Matt Smith's first episode really felt like it could have been the first episode of Doctor Who. Ever, or in the after the 1989 hiatus, and this season sort of did the same thing. I mean, granted, in that first episode they do call back and Matt Smith makes an appearance, but otherwise, though, the tone, the cinematography, everything. And the only thing I would say that still is a shame that hasn't emerged yet is a theme for him, and I think the music has been serviceable this season, but never really rose to any great heights. But at the same time, because the music is serviceable, it's also not noticeably lacking, and it's certainly not like that first season or two where it was bad.
Well, and I think this ties into the different tone. The Doctor is not an adventurer hero like he was in the Steven Spielberg version that Matt Smith was started off as. I mean, when I say Steven Spielberg, I mean actual like studying of Steven Spielberg films. And that's evident, I mean, down to the fact that there's an episode where they wanted him to remind you of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
And that's not who this Doctor is. This is the old British show from the 60s in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I was explaining to a friend that he is really, in a good way, not in any kind of rip-off way because he's his own Doctor, but he really is a blend of John Pertwee and William Hartnell's Doctors, the first and third, because there's things that he does that are aspects of both. Like the third Doctor was always nicer in general than him, but he also would get cross with people and just tell them off. And you look at those first season of Doctor Who, the Doctor, particularly his first episode, the Doctor's a jerk. Like he's going to leave people behind. He could care less.
Well, and they've been doing something else cool with him. He's more alien than he's ever been, to the extent that he doesn't seem to understand human emotion very well. And I shouldn't say more than he's ever been. Certainly more than he's been in the new series, and I would say largely even the old ones. Like I don't remember him being as alien even in the old show.
Right.
But there's something else they're doing with him that I love. Is there these soliloquies that he has?
Yeah.
And I remember reading about the process of writing for Doctor Who, and this was for the novels. And they had said that, like there was sort of the editors or the publishers said that you don't write what the Doctor's thinking because his mind can't be understood. And it's been so cool that there's been several episodes. This one, there's a scene where he's talking to himself. He's having a conversation. You almost get the impression it's two different regenerations talking. And one of them, I'll be honest with you, sounded exactly like Tom Baker.
Yeah.
Do you know what the scene I'm talking about where he's having a debate?
Where he's in the train. It's before he decides not to knock on Clara's door, and she interestingly does knock on his door.
Yes. Yep.
But yeah, and that's such a fantastic aspect to him. And I don't say this callously because it's something that people say, right? Nowadays that people will refer to Asperger's as sort of like, oh, it's Asperger's-y. But the Doctor really reminds me of someone who has Asperger's syndrome. I have a close relationship with someone who does, and in that way that he doesn't understand, people and how they react and what they mean.
My power is dying.
Oh, so that's fine. The one of the things, because I want to talk more about the doctor, but we'll wrap up with that because I want to talk about the content of the episode a little bit. One of the things I loved about this episode is I love an episode that has all Doctor Who episodes have some quotient of who done it. It's usually who's the monster and why, and this has that. But this episode delivered a detective story in a linear, like the discovery of what the problem is and how to solve it was presented in a more linear way that I haven't seen in Doctor Who in a while, that I was just loving. Like I had a big grin on my face the whole time he's solving the problem. And like every time somebody's dying and he's like, tell me what you see, tell me what you see. And they're using the computers and he's just like eliminating possibilities. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen an episode where the doctor was doing that so deliberately. And I really enjoyed that out of this episode, where the other episodes he's doing that, but it's usually broader. And oftentimes that's the part of Doctor Who episodes, even the best ones, that you don't want to scrutinize too much because they fall down. And this one didn't really do that.
Yeah, there was a really that whole aspect of the investigation and him recognizing the environment that they were in, and that they were part of an experiment. And I mean, the cleverness of writing a scary monster story, and a really like sort of, I don't know how to describe it. That when the mummy appears and he basically walks across the room in an eerie way because no one else can see him. So the filming of that and the editorial decisions were great. Depicting what the people see and then what the other people, the victims see and what no one else sees, and to have that his mastery of actually studying the people and asking to report to them what they see as they basically have 66 seconds to live was just perfect suspense.
Yeah.
And wonder and mystery and everything else. I mean, everything that makes a story good. And it should have been dumb. A story with, a mummy's an old sort of dumb. I mean, when was the last time there was a mummy movie that wasn't a joke?
Right.
And the Orient Express, I'd imagine most of the audience doesn't even know what that is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, other than the reference to the stories that you still hear, and that's it. I mean, I don't think I've actually read it, or maybe I read it years and years ago.
And this story, surprisingly, was complex enough that at the end of it, I actually had to watch it twice, and I'm still not entirely certain of everything that happened.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about? At the end of the episode, the doctor basically sort of defeats the thing. He takes from the woman's fear, and the mummy comes after him, which was awesome. Like, I was like, holy crap. And the way he faced essentially death was really cool. And then the train explodes.
Yeah.
And the next scene is probably one of the coolest images I've seen since Doctor Who came back. Is he and Clara on this alien planet, and he is in his signature doctor outfit,
shirt, black. Yeah.
Looking really cool. Even his hair is. Go back and watch that. His hair is cooler in that scene than it normally is. And he explains to her sort of his lack of humanity before that point.
Yeah.
And that he says something that's a callback to the 50th anniversary episode where he said, sometimes there are no good options, but we still have to choose. Yeah. And he says choose, which struck me from the Kill the Moon episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the way that they're continuing that. Like, it's neat that this episode, which in a lot of ways is just a standalone episode, still isn't. It involves a soldier, which is a theme that keeps going through the series, from the Doctor's early very strong opinions about soldiers, to Danny being a former soldier, to this guy, the threat in this being a soldier, to the Doctor's continuing situation with Clara and their breakup, but also to his, like, there's this, it's almost like giving the option, because I was reading and a lot of people didn't like Kill the Moon, and it was because they were really, and a friend of mine I was talking to more specifically than things I read online, the Doctor was such a jerk in the episode. And I was like, it's because he is. Like, if you take the quintessential element of who the Doctor is, and then you remove that big heart emotion thing, and you make him more of a calculator that is there to solve a problem and conquer evil, this is what it looks like. And this is what he does. And I was thinking, you were just saying it in that where he's just talking to the people as they die. The 10th Doctor would have been screaming, "No more deaths today. No one dies today." And Matt Smith would have been like teary-eyed and fighting hard. It wouldn't have worked, because if you imagine those doctors, those people still would have died. And it still would have ended the way it did. I don't believe that the Doctor would have absorbed someone's fear any sooner if it had been one of the other incarnations. It's just this Doctor is like a machine. And I think one of the other things that I think is starting to emerge is this Doctor thinks and acts with military precision, despite the fact that he has this really bad attitude about soldiers.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's that whole reference to the Mummy having been a soldier.
Yeah.
The Doctor demonstrates understanding of that, and there's really no contempt when he arrives at that conclusion. Yeah, it's funny, the whole thing with him being different and that troubling to people. I know I've said this already, but Doctor Who, back before the new show, when you would say you liked Doctor Who, it was really hard to find anybody who had watched it.
Right.
Like it was so not mainstream that I only knew about 3 people my entire life who watched it and truly enjoyed it. I knew a lot of people who'd seen episodes and hated it because it was chintzy looking or it was British or whatever. But the Doctor is not Captain Kirk, and he's not Han Solo, and he's not Luke Skywalker, and he's not Ben Kenobi. He is a weird guy from a weird race who cannot relate to the people that they're around. He has an affinity for human beings, but he's not one of them. He looks like us, but he's not at all like us. And this season is just doing a fantastic job of capturing that weird, off-putting element that made the original show. It's funny, but unpopular. Right. With at least American audiences.
Yeah, it is, and it was interesting that they started pushing that more in that final season with Sylvester McCoy and some of that stuff. If you dig into the mythology and the Cardamel plan, the Cardamel was the script editor that had this big plan for where they were going to go with Doctor Who, and it was going to start to get really hard sci-fi and really strange. But nonetheless, and I wasn't a fan of it, to be honest. But the point of what I'm bringing it up is they were starting to bring the show more and more into that realm. And if you watch the last season of Sylvester McCoy, the last 2, he starts to have weird watches and he starts to make reference to really strange times and things. And it's all stuff that's always been a part of the new reinvented series, just handled a little differently. The idea that the Doctor has this experience and world and these references, the sort of Star Wars-y, Lovecraftian references to other things that go on that off screen. And you're right, it's just a thing. And different Doctors have handled it.
Can you give me what you're referring to? Do you have an example there?
There's he starts doing a lot of things, like there's the Hand of Omega one where in Remembrance of the Daleks, and all of a sudden you start to find out that he had this involvement with hiding. He had this like really important involvement with hiding a piece of the many parts of Omega and what it meant. And he there's like, you start to see, I'm trying to think of the specific episodes, you start to see symbols that we never saw before, like on things, and there's symbols that relate to something.
Okay.
And I know the novels got into it. The novels started getting into, there's something called the looms, and Time Lords were genetically created from scratch or something, and they didn't have parents, and all these things that this show, that's why I'm saying I'm kind of glad. I don't like that. I don't want it to go that far with his alienness. I like that he has parents or grandparents, or even if the implication he's an orphan or any of those things. Like, I want the Doctor to have a lineage, but it's still very cool. It was something else. I haven't read any of that stuff recently, but they're very steeped in it. He's on Twitter at Well Done. If he's watching these, we worked together, and he and I used to argue at length because he was a fan of that stuff.
There was one other thing that's just been a real hallmark of Doctor Who since the show came back on the air. This is another episode that has a great cast of just characters and character actors that are perfect for the couple minutes you get to be with them. There's a scientist, I guess like an anthropologist or something.
Yeah.
His few minutes on screen he's a compelling character that you kind of like, and you feel like you know him within the short period of time that he's there and dies. And then the other character that stood out to me was the captain of the, or I guess he's the captain.
Yeah, he's the captain.
I guess the captain of the
Yeah,
train.
the chief. Yeah, and then the chief engineer too. Don't forget him. He was great.
Yeah, the chief. Right. No, I did forget about him. In any case, it's just one of those things that makes Doctor Who work. If you have those castings and they're not good, or the characters aren't likable, or the actors can't handle it, you end up with an episode that is irritating or weak. And they've done an amazing job of making all those people work.
It was neat that the Doctor introduces jelly babies into the episode.
Yeah,
I think there's a reference to jelly babies in one of the earlier, like in the past 8 seasons. I think there have been references to them, but I thought it was cool that that's that's what's in his cigarette case is jelly babies. And then I guess the last thing is probably the cliffhanger. Clara's turn really surprised me. And I don't mean it didn't surprise me that she's still going to be on the show and she's going with him. What surprised me was the way she did it. Like, I know they have that discussion of her saying, "Isn't this an addiction?" And then he sort of even says, he's like, "I don't know, let me know how it goes." Like, I know he says, "I'd have to stop to find out if it's hard to quit, and let me know how it goes." She has that conversation with Danny. And then she basically says Danny's fine with it, which we kind of know he is. I mean, the implication we've gotten up until now, after him initially disliking the Doctor when they first met each other, he's very supportive of her and doesn't seem to have a problem with what she does. But it was a very interesting turn, and I wonder what the implication's going to be later. I wonder what the implications like is her plan to just run until she's done and then go back to Danny and he won't know the difference. You know what I mean? Like, it'd just be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know what to make of that. I was intrigued by it. I didn't know if the idea was that they had gotten through their rough patch, and that was just supposed to be a demonstration of that. I mean, I guess time will tell. I know that I love the last image of the episode. I don't know if you recall it, but it reminds me of the last image of, I think, the first episode with Matt Smith, where they agree to go off together, and the two of them are standing at the console. Yeah. And they both grab it, like they both grab the thing and pull it down and kind of look up, like almost like they're about to, go on a roller coaster. It's a huge sort of kinetic end, and it was a nice sort of return to that moment in time that I'm assuming it was intended to recall.
The other thing that I liked about it is it was another reminder that this Doctor is only really happy and having fun when he's getting what he wants.
Yeah,
like, it's part of his personality. It's just that I don't know. It's just interesting. Like, when you see he and Clara having fun, it's because they're doing something he wants. And
yeah, I mean,
it's interesting to me. It's an interesting character trait.
Yeah, I mean, he's a 2,000-year-old character, alien, who likes to just be not bored. I mean, a lot of times that almost seems like that's what it is that he's looking for these adventures. He certainly doesn't have the same mortality that we do, and that causes him to lose focus with what matters to a person.
Yeah,
including their very lives.
Yeah, it's all very, very interesting. So next week's episode is called Flatline, which is a good name, and we'll see where that goes. We're getting near the end of the season. It's actually not the typical 13 episodes. It's 12 episodes because I think the Christmas episode will be coming only weeks after that 12th episode, so they must be calling that 13. So it'll be very interesting to see where this is going, and I'm surprised. It's been a few episodes in a row where we haven't returned to the Heaven Woman, the God Woman. So I'll be curious because I'm assuming by the 11th and 12th episode she'll be first and foremost. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes and how it leads into the Christmas thing.
So does this season end with the Christmas episode?
Yeah, I believe
Is
so.
that the end of the season?
That's the plan, yeah, and then it'll be off until next fall.
So far, so good. I'm loving this episode or the season. I'm loving Peter Capaldi and this latest regeneration of the Doctor.
I have a feeling the Christmas episode is going to have something to do with. I bet you that there's something Grinchy, and that he's the Grinch. Like I bet you that his character. Like I think his character will end up changing a bit, from his like the causticness of him, And I wonder if that's what the Christmas episode theme is going to be. Now, last year, and it seems to be Moffat's preferences. He doesn't, even though he's written some of the really great Christmas episodes, his preference seems to be to make the Christmas episodes just an in context story.
Right.
So maybe it won't have anything to do with Christmas other than the setting. But I don't know. I have a feeling that that's going to end up coming in is the Doctor, or the Doctor as a Scrooge type.
Yes, I was just going to say, don't say the Grinch, say Scrooge.
Yeah,
the Grinch is. Yeah, we're into the big classics.
We're into Dickens. The Doctor's two hearts grow 4 sizes.
Yeah.
All right, that's our show. We will be back next week for the next episode, episode 9. See you then.